You feel it as a cold dread in the pit of your stomach, a subtle poison entering the bloodstream of the conversation. The interaction begins normally, but then, with a deft twist of words, a carefully placed sigh, or a question layered with insinuation, the ground shifts beneath your feet. You find yourself defending actions you never took, justifying beliefs you hold dear, or worse, feeling a profound sense of guilt for a crime that was never committed. You have become an unwilling actor in a play you never auditioned for, and the script is being written, line by line, by a master puppeteer who stands just out of sight. You are being managed, handled, and directed, your own goodwill and emotional responses expertly rewired to serve an agenda that is not your own. You leave these encounters feeling not just defeated, but diminished, as if a part of your own sovereignty has been carved away. The frustration is a burning acid, for you know you have been bested, but the game was so subtle, so cloaked in the language of reason or concern, that to even name it feels like paranoia. Meanwhile, the manipulator proceeds, unburdened by the chaos they create, securing advantages, shifting blame, and consolidating power, all while maintaining a veneer of plausible deniability. They are the coworker who gets you to do their work, while making you feel honored to help. The family member who controls decisions through a constant drip of emotional blackmail. The partner who twists your every concern into evidence of your own instability. They are architects of realities that serve only them, and they build their empires on the territory of your compliance. You have been told the solutions are simple, a catechism of self-help mantras repeated endlessly. You must set firm boundaries, you must learn to say no, you must walk away from toxic people. This advice, while born of good intention, is the counsel of a perpetual victim. It is a strategy of defense, of retreat, of concession. It teaches you how to build higher walls, but it never teaches you how to dismantle the siege engines at your door. You are taught to absorb the blow and then retreat to safety, never to seize the weapon from the enemy's hand and bring the battle to a halt. The fundamental flaw in this defensive posture is that it cedes the initiative entirely to the aggressor. The manipulator is still the one acting, and you are the one reacting. They set the terms, they choose the battlefield, and you are left with the meager choice of how to lose. Quickly, by conceding, or slowly, by exhausting yourself in a battle of attrition. But what if the entire premise of this defensive strategy is wrong? What if the most powerful response to a hidden attack is not to build a better shield, but to become so adept at seeing the subtle mechanics of the assault that you can disable it with a single precise move? What if, instead of merely surviving the manipulator's game, you could, with surgical precision, turn the very energy of their attack back upon them, forcing them into a state of confusion and retreat? Niccolo Machiavelli, a man whose entire existence depended on navigating a world of unparalleled conspiracy and psychological warfare, understood a profound truth. You do not defeat a master of shadows by shining a brighter light, but by learning to control the shadows yourself. He knew that true power lay not in reacting to a dynamic, but in fundamentally redefining it. His methods were not about building defenses, but about executing strategic reversals that would leave his opponents disarmed and exposed, often without them fully understanding how it happened. What I am about to reveal to you are not mere tactics. They are philosophical shifts in perspective, 3 master-level approaches to transforming you from the pawn in the game to the player who sees the entire board with chilling clarity. Master these, and the puppeteers of the world will find that their strings are attached to a statue, immovable and impassive, and their once reliable manipulations will become desperate, futile gestures against a mind they can no longer predict or control. Before we delve into the tactics themselves, we must first understand the foundational mindset from which they spring. You cannot wield these tools effectively if your mind is still a tempest of reactivity. You must first cultivate what I call the dual perspective of the spectator and the surgeon. The spectator is the part of you that learns to watch human interactions, including your own, as if from a great height. It observes without judgment. It sees the emotional currents, the subtle bids for power, the hidden agendas, not as personal threats, but as fascinating, predictable patterns of human behavior. The spectator is not cold or uncaring. It is simply detached, like an astronomer observing the clockwork motions of the planets. This part of you does not get angry or feel guilty. It simply gathers data. It recognizes the manipulator's guilt trip not as a reflection of your own moral failing, but as a guilt trip pattern, a specific technique being deployed for a specific effect. This initial detachment is your fortress. It is the sacred space of clarity from which all power originates. Once the spectator has gathered its data, the surgeon takes over. The surgeon is the part of you that acts with deliberate, dispassionate precision. A surgeon does not hate the disease. They simply understand its nature and know the precise incisions required to remove it without killing the patient. The surgeon is not emotional during the operation. They are focused, clinical, and effective. Their actions guided by knowledge and a clear objective. When you apply these tactics, you must do so as the surgeon, with a steady hand, a clear mind, and an unwavering focus on the objective, which is not to harm, but to restore health and balance to a dynamic that has been poisoned by manipulation. Without this dual mindset, the tactics I am about to share will be useless. You will attempt them with a hand trembling with anger or a voice cracking with fear, and you will fail. First, cultivate the spectator who sees the game, then empower the surgeon who ends it. Let us journey to a richly adorned chamber in Rome. Machiavelli is part of a Florentine delegation attempting to secure a loan from a vastly wealthy and notoriously manipulative bishop. The bishop has no real need to lend the money and enjoys the sport of psychological domination. For an hour, he has subjected the Florentines to a masterful display of passive aggression and intellectual condescension, questioning their financial acumen, hinting at their city's declining influence, and making them feel like provincial beggars. He frames the loan not as a transaction, but as a profound favor, a life-saving act of charity for which they should be eternally grateful. The delegation is becoming flustered, defensive, and desperate, their position weakening with every word. They are trapped in the bishop's frame. They are the inferiors, he is the savior. Machiavelli, having observed as the spectator, decides it is time for the surgeon to act. He waits for a pause, and then, instead of pleading their case, he looks at the bishop with an expression of deep intellectual admiration. He says, "Your Grace, forgive my interruption, but I must confess I am in awe. I have studied the arts of negotiation my entire life, but rarely have I seen them practiced with such mastery." The bishop, intrigued, raises an eyebrow. Machiavelli continues, his tone one of pure academic appreciation. "Your ability to frame a mutually beneficial financial transaction as an act of profound magnanimity is breathtaking. You have created a dynamic where our gratitude for your character must necessarily outweigh our concern for the interest rates. By making this about your virtue and our desperation, you have rendered the practical details almost irrelevant. It ensures you hold all the psychological power regardless of the outcome. Truly, I will be studying this technique for years to come." The effect is instantaneous and devastating. The bishop's face for a fleeting moment shows a flicker of shock, of a man whose hidden machinery has been laid bare on the table for all to see. He cannot get angry because he has been praised. He cannot deny it because the description is perfectly accurate. He cannot continue the charade because it is no longer a charade. It has been named, catalogued, and admired like a butterfly pinned to a board. The hidden frame has been shattered. The bishop, with a thin, tight smile, dismisses the pageantry and says, "Let us dispense with the pleasantries and discuss the numbers, shall we?" Machiavelli did not just defend, he seized control of the entire narrative. This illustrates the first and most fundamental tactic. The first tactic is to expose the frame with analytical praise. Every manipulation operates within a hidden context, a frame that dictates the rules of engagement. This frame is designed to put you at a disadvantage. It could be the guilt frame. If you really cared about this team, you would stay late to finish this. The urgency frame. I need an answer right now, or the opportunity is gone forever. Or the superiority frame. I have much more experience in these matters, so you should probably just trust my judgment. Reacting from within the frame is always a losing move. The masterful counter is to ignore the content of the manipulation entirely, and instead to name the frame itself, not as an accusation, but as an object of detached, intellectual admiration. This works because it triggers a powerful cognitive dissonance in the manipulator. You are simultaneously complimenting their cleverness while exposing their disingenuous intent. This forces them into an impossible position. The protocol for this tactic has 3 steps. First, The spectator must pause and emotionally detach. You must quell your initial flash of anger or guilt. Second, the spectator identifies the hidden frame. What is the unspoken rule being imposed on this interaction? What role am I being cast in? Third, the surgeon speaks, naming the tactic, not the person or their character. The clumsy, failing approach is to say, "You're trying to guilt trip me." This is an accusation, and it leads to a fight. The masterful approach is to say, "That's a sophisticated rhetorical technique, framing a practical request in moral terms." It creates a powerful sense of obligation. The clumsy approach is, "You're just trying to pressure me." The masterful approach is, "I'm impressed with the strategy of introducing time pressure to bypass a lengthy analysis." It's a very effective way to drive towards a quick commitment. By praising the tactic as a strategy, you grant them intelligence but deny them power. You have shown them that you see the strings of the puppet show, and a puppeteer cannot control a puppet that is aware of its own strings. The second tactic is engineered for the manipulator who feeds on emotional chaos. This is the individual who uses targeted anger, strategic sulking, passive-aggressive barbs, or even manufactured tears to provoke a reaction. Your emotional response is their nourishment. It is the proof that their tactic is working and the fuel that powers their next move. Anger from you confirms they've hit a nerve. Guilt from you gives them leverage. Frustration from you tells them they are winning. The Machiavellian counter is not to suppress your emotions, but to deny them as a data source for the manipulator. You must create an emotional vacuum. This is not the same as being cold or silent, both of which are powerful emotional signals of anger. An emotional vacuum is a space of calm, neutral, and almost benevolent curiosity. It is the serene eye of the hurricane around which their manufactured storm rages without effect. The protocol for this tactic is also threefold. First, you must consciously regulate your own physiology. When you feel the emotional spike, take a slow, deliberate breath. Unclench your jaw. Relax your shoulders. You cannot project external calm if you are experiencing internal turmoil. Second, offer zero emotional data in your response. Your words, your tone, and your body language must be neutral. Third, you must gently but firmly recenter the conversation on objective logic or a clear desired outcome. For example, when a boss explodes in anger over a trivial mistake, the reactive person becomes defensive or angry in return. The master of this tactic waits for the tirade to end, pauses for a beat, and says in a perfectly calm voice, "I understand that you are expressing a significant level of frustration. To help me fix the issue, could you clarify the specific practical outcome you would like to see now?" Notice the language. Expressing frustration is a neutral observation, not an acceptance of blame. Practical outcome redirects from the emotional drama to a solvable problem. If a family member uses a passive-aggressive comment like, "Must be nice to have so much free time," you don't take the bait. You respond with genuine, unaffected curiosity. "That's an interesting observation. I'm not sure I follow the connection to our current conversation. What was it you were hoping we could decide on?" You treat their emotional probe as a non sequitur, a piece of irrelevant data, forcing them to either state their resentment plainly, which they rarely will, or drop it entirely. By creating this vacuum, you become an enigma. The manipulator is throwing punches into a void, and with no impact, they quickly exhaust themselves and, in their frustration, often overplay their hand and reveal their true intentions. The third, and perhaps most audacious tactic, is reserved for manipulators who use creeping boundaries and unreasonable requests to gain ground. They will ask for a small, inconvenient favor, counting on your desire to be agreeable. Once granted, that new boundary becomes the starting point for their next, slightly larger request. This salami slicing of your boundaries is a slow, insidious form of domination. To fight each slice is exhausting. The counterintuitive and devastatingly effective Machiavellian response is not to refuse, but to agree with such overwhelming enthusiasm that you can leverage their own logic to an absurd conclusion. This tactic is amplifying to absurdity. You take the manipulator's unreasonable premise and, instead of rejecting it, you embrace it so fully that you expose its inherent ridiculousness. The protocol is as follows. First, you must agree with their request, not grudgingly, but with apparent genuine helpfulness and enthusiasm. Second, you identify the unspoken logic or principle behind their request. Third, you propose the next logical step, a step that follows their own principle but pushes it into a realm of absurdity that they cannot possibly agree to. Imagine a colleague who frequently asks you to just quickly look over their work, which is a disguised attempt to get you to do unpaid editing. They say, "Could you just do a quick proofread of this one-page summary? You're so much better at it than I am." The failing response is a sigh and a reluctant, "Okay." The masterful response is an enthusiastic, "Absolutely, I'd be happy to." And to ensure consistency across the entire document, it makes perfect sense for me to also proofread the full 50-page report it's attached to. And while I'm at it, I should probably reformat the graphs to match the style guide. Let me block out my entire afternoon for it. I want to make sure it's perfect for you. You have taken their premise, "You're better at this," and amplified it to its logical but absurd conclusion. You have not said no. You have said yes so powerfully that they are forced to be the one to say, "Oh no, please don't, that's too much, I'll handle it." You have made them the guardian of the very boundary they were trying to violate. This tactic is exceptionally powerful because it uses the manipulator's own momentum against them, and it does so while maintaining a mask of complete and utter helpfulness. The true mastery of these techniques lies in their integrated application, layering them in a sophisticated sequence that leaves a manipulator utterly bewildered. Let us revisit the scenario of a manipulative boss trying to pin their own critical error on you. The boss calls you into their office, their face a mask of solemn disappointment, the opening move in the guilt frame. They say, "I've just come from a meeting with the VP. She was furious about the incorrect data in the quarterly report. I have to say, I'm disappointed. I trusted you to oversee those numbers." The amateur reacts with panic. "But I sent them to you for approval. You signed off on them. This is a fatal error." You have accepted their frame and are now fighting from within it. The master, however, initiates the emotional vacuum. You remain calm, your expression neutral, and you listen without interruption. You let the accusation hang in the air, offering no emotional reaction for it to feed on. This silence is unnerving for the manipulator. After a moment, you apply the first tactic, exposing the frame. You say in a tone of detached analysis, "This is an interesting leadership moment. The strategy of assigning responsibility downward to protect the command structure is a classic one. It creates a single point of accountability, insulating the leader from the initial fallout. It's a very pragmatic approach. You have not accused your boss of lying. You have described his action as if it were a case study in a management textbook. He is now off balance. He cannot agree with you, but he also cannot easily disagree. He may try to double down, perhaps shifting to an emotional attack. This isn't about strategy. This is about your lack of attention to detail. I'm questioning your commitment. This is the moment for the second application of the emotional vacuum. You do not get defensive. You reply, "I understand that holding me accountable is the current course of action. For me to do that effectively, I will need to understand the full scope of that ownership." This is where you deploy the third tactic, amplifying to absurdity, with surgical precision. You continue, "To take full and public ownership, as you're suggesting, I will need to author a comprehensive after-action report. It will detail the flaw in the data verification process, which, as you know, concludes with your sign-off. I will need to detail my failure to override your final approval. I will then need to present this report to the VP and her entire team to demonstrate my full accountability and to propose a new system where senior approval can be questioned by subordinates. This is a significant undertaking, so I'll need to clear my current projects to focus on it. Is that the course of action you wish for me to take?" You have taken his attempt to assign blame and amplified it into a terrifyingly bureaucratic, career-threatening process of total exposure, all under the guise of taking responsibility. The absurdity and risk to him are now so immense that his only rational move is to retreat, likely saying, "Let's not be hasty. We'll handle this internally." You have not only defended yourself, you have seized complete control of the situation and established a new, unspoken boundary that he will be terrified to cross again. To wield this power is to walk a fine line. These tactics are tools of psychological leverage, and like any form of leverage, they can be used to build or to destroy. Their ethical use is defined entirely by intent. The goal is not to harm, not to humiliate, not to become a manipulator yourself, but to neutralize a manipulative attack and restore the situation to a state of clarity, reason, and equilibrium. You are the surgeon removing a cancer from the dynamic, not an assassin. The moment you take pleasure in the other person's discomfort, the moment you use these tools to advance your own agenda at the unjust expense of another, you have crossed the line from strategist to sociopath. The true Machiavellian master does not seek to create chaos, but to navigate it with unparalleled skill. Their reputation becomes one of unshakable calm, of profound insight, and of being someone whose clarity cuts through the emotional fog that incapacitates others. They gain power not by dominating people, but by becoming immune to domination. Your journey to this level of mastery is a marathon, not a sprint. It requires you to first become a dispassionate spectator of your own mind, observing your emotional reactions without being ruled by them. It demands practice in low-stakes environments, perhaps naming the frame of a pushy salesperson or creating an emotional vacuum with a dramatic friend. With each successful application, you will build the confidence and calibration needed for more significant encounters. The world is filled with manipulators, both conscious and unconscious. They are an unavoidable feature of the human landscape. You can continue to be the prey in their ecosystem, or you can evolve into a creature that they cannot hunt. You can remain a puppet, or you can become the one who sees, understands, and ultimately controls the strings. The choice is not easy. It requires you to discard a lifetime of reactive habits and to embrace a level of self-awareness and control that few ever achieve. But the alternative is to live a life of quiet desperation, perpetually reacting to games you don't understand. The tools are now in your hands. The chessboard is before you. Master them wisely. Apply them with surgical precision and ethical intent, and you will discover a form of personal power and mental freedom that you never thought possible.